Emery, like Corey or others, we have to look at things one of three ways, and possibly a fourth. One, Emery is attempting to make a buck and it's all a lie, right? That's choice number one. Choice number two, he's a victim of some crazy MK Ultra program, and these are all downloads, memories that he believes are real. Scary thought. Three, it's all true. Right, so those are your three choices. There are no gray areas or one where it would blend into the other, and that's what we have to accept with Emery or Corey or others. But I'm going to say that with Emery, like Corey, Emery's a very grounded guy.
Well,
very
Jimmy,
grounded.
I could subpoena 5 witnesses at least in a court of law to prove legally that Emery has been talking to me since 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he was trying to make money, then why did it take me 10 years to get this guy to come forward?
Right.
And why did I get... see, everybody's hearing it backwards, right? They're hearing Emery now after we've already done cosmic disclosure and gotten most of Corey's testimony out. I didn't even hear from Corey until I'd already heard all the Emery stuff and had years to meditate on it. So I got it backwards, right? And then when Corey shows up, it's like, oh, this could explain why I know this guy who claims to have autopsied 3,000 different tissue samples of exobiological creatures. It's very, very strange. All these different things he was telling me about, all the way back, 2009, 2010. Oh, yeah, we had aquatics, and we had insectoids, and we had mammalians, and we had reptilians. And we had beings that were somewhat energetic and somewhat physical, and we caught them in between in a protoplasmic state. And the scariest one was such and such. And then we had the Rock Man. He's 70 feet tall, and most of the ETs are not as tall as we are, and they're all human. They all have a 5-star pattern. I mean, I've been hearing this stuff for 10 years. And so I'm really excited that he has finally come forward, even though it happened under tragic circumstances with his life being threatened repeatedly.
Right.
This is a big story. And the deep state cannot put this genie back in the bottle. You're going to have to deal with it, guys. You're going to have to deal with the fact that we have brought out, we meaning this community, I'm not taking personal credit, we, this community, are bringing out information that is light years ahead of you guys admitting that you just have some reverse engineered craft from Roswell, that you've turned into things that can take a little cruise around our solar system. We are way beyond that. We have a very credible legal case that we can make that there is a program already in place that is thoroughly interacting with hundreds and hundreds of different races of extraterrestrials and has thoroughly colonized planets and moons all throughout our solar system and very likely outside our solar system as well. It's a huge story.
Let's take a break. Let's continue with David about Emery Smith right after this. David, back to Emery really quick because I've got some other things I want to talk with you before we run out of time. How did Emery reach out to you the first time?
It was at a meeting in sometime early to mid 2009. With Dr. Stephen Greer at the Inn of the Seventh Ray in Topanga, California, which is a restaurant.
Right. Okay. And when he started to reveal some of these things, I mean, even for you, you've got to have squinty eyes, right? You know, and you're listening. How did you take it at first? Were you skeptical?
Well, that's a tough question because for the listener to project themselves into my shoes, they would have to have already had over 10 years of talking to insiders that were at cosmic clearance 35 levels above the president and heard all kinds of weird stuff. So by the time I met Emery, I'd already had probably over 80 hours of conversation with Henry Deacon. Mm-hmm. I'd already heard about him going to Mars. I'd already heard about some very, very strange... I mean, there's still a lot of things he told me that I haven't gone public with. And, of course, you're also told by all these people oh, if you ever talked about this online, you get a knock on the door the next morning. It's so classified, it's so secret. They just take you out, and not to dinner, but permanently out.
Right.
So,
well, I guess what I'm asking is, were you skeptical, and what was the turning point where you went, okay, all right.
I feel as if I have a pretty good BS detector. And when somebody sits down with me and they start talking, there are certain things that I look for, and I don't want to necessarily say what they all are, because then these so-called LARPers, live action role play, there's a lot of people that want to be fake insiders and make shit up.
Right.
We don't want to give them the tools on how to fool guys like me. So I'm not going to say everything, but I will just say that one of the best tools that anybody can employ is the same thing that they use in police interrogation, and that is, if you have somebody who's lying and you ask them specific questions about little tiny details of what they're saying, typically their imagination is not going to fill in those blanks fast enough, and they'll basically try to whitewash it and dance around it and go back to what they were trying to tell you that they've already spent a lot of time structuring and thinking about.
That's right.
Whereas somebody who's telling you the truth, and I know, Jimmy, I've heard you use this all the time on your show, whether you know that you're doing it or whether it's intuitive, you do this. If you ask people seemingly nonsensical, off-topic questions that are kind of tangentially related to one little thing they said, and every single time you do that, you're double-clicking on a whole new world of stuff, and it just spills out of them like a fountain. And then you grab one little piece of 25 interesting things they say, and then you get another one of those fountains. And then you grab one piece of that, and you get another fountain, and another piece, and another fountain. And then this goes on for like 6 hours, and you're exhausted. But in that 6 hours, you have heard so much stuff that you could write 5 movies based on it and barely even get started. And it's all amazing. And so I'm looking at this guy, Emery back in the day had a lot more PTSD about what had happened to him than he does now, because he did get beaten at one point when a colonel friend of his took him into a restricted area on the base to show him this weird octagonal shaped, it was a octahedral shaped UFO, like a 2 pyramids back to back, basically, this golden thing. And they got in trouble, and he actually got beaten and by other people on the base. And then he tried to go back to that area, and he was riding his bike, and he got hit with a directed energy weapon, got very, very sick. And so I'm literally watching this person having a full body trauma response as he's trying to tell me this story. And I mean shaking, I mean full on crying, tears just streaming down his face, and not just the tears, but literally when people don't even have any control over it and they got snot pouring out of their nose and it's all down their lips and it's dangling off of their chin. That's how much this dude was crying. Okay?
Right.
You can't fake that. I'm sorry. There are Hollywood actors who act pretty well, but you can't do that in the guise of a 6-hour brutalizing interrogation that I gave him, which would be brutal if you were trying to lie, but easy if you're telling the truth.
Right.
And so, and my mind is going, how in the world do I wrap my head around this? 3,000 different extraterrestrial races? And so I started to draw some conclusions. And one of the conclusions I drew was, okay, let's say that Henry Deacon is telling the truth. Let's say that there's bases on Mars already that we're not being told about, which is actually pretty easy to understand if you see that Roswell was a working craft that they got running, which means they could fly anywhere around the solar system they want. And then if they can go there, they don't even need to bring anything with them. They could just start building structures out of native materials, just like what might have happened here with the pyramids. Those could have been extraterrestrials using large blocks of stone to build these really cool monuments. They didn't need to bring anything with them except their ship.
Right.
So if that happened, if we've been lied to about Roswell for 70 years and they've been able to fly around, of course they're going to settle on Mars. Of course they're going to settle on the moon. Of course they're going to settle on the moons of Jupiter, the moons of Saturn, the Oort cloud, the Kuiper belt, the asteroid belt, of course. And it's just, it's offensive to us because it's such a big lie. It's a lie that is so vast that it seems to be beyond comprehension, but yet somehow I'm getting thrown in with these people, or they're finding me. And because I've already heard things from others, it's like when you're in Boy Scouts and you trade patches back and forth, right? This is the same thing, except I'm trading information. And so as long as I have interesting stuff to tell other people, they're going to keep talking. And I keep learning more and more. And when I'm interested in things, I remember them very precisely. So I could have heard something 15 years ago, and I'll remember it when somebody's telling me a story, and I'll be like, oh, my God, yeah. And isn't the code name such and such? And, oh, yeah, how did you know that? Well, yeah, this guy told me back in, Delmarva when I was driving up the I-95 from Virginia to New York. That's when I first heard that, That's the kind of stuff that would happen. So I'm trying to think about this, and I'm saying, okay, we got bases on Mars, we got bases on the moon, we got bases throughout our solar system, and all these ETs are all over the place. Henry Deacon was telling me that there were, at the time that he was there, which was, I guess, in the 80s and early 90s, there were 200,000 quote-unquote personnel working in his base on Mars, and 10,000 of those personnel were born on Earth. So I'm trying to wrap my head around that. And then I'm trying to wrap my head around, okay, what happens when cultures get together based on Earth's history is they trade. But nobody's going to want paper money, and they probably don't even care about gold, because there's plenty of asteroids you can mine that are just solid gold, or solid diamonds even. Some of the interiors of these planets are all diamonds. So, like gas planets, for example, because of the pressure.
Right.
So what do you trade? What's considered valuable, right? Information. And what's the best type of information? Actual bodies of beings that these various ETs have recovered in their wars. They fight somebody, they shoot the ship, they bring back the ship. They say, we'll trade you this wreckage and we'll trade you the bodies inside. And so one of the things that Emery started telling me back in 2009 is, hey man, it's weird, but like a lot of times the craft have DNA, and they're cloned off of the body of the being inside. So a ship is actually custom made to order off of your own DNA, and it's an integration of technology and biology. Well, nobody else had been saying that before, and now people are hearing that, and for everybody else it's new. So for me, I'm saying, okay, you got this guy at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, not too far from Area 51. He's just one grunt working this job that probably hundreds and hundreds of other guys have done. And just in the matter of whatever it was, 3-4 years, he autopsies 3,000 different specimens, some of which were just, little tissue samples, but a lot of which, I think he said over 1,000, 1,500, something like that, were actual intact or largely intact bodies. No two looked alike. And so I started interrogating him. And this was, again, we're talking 10, 9, 8 years ago, because we had several conversations. And the degree of specific information that this guy was giving me is what everybody's getting a taste of now, like if they listen to your interview with him on the show. I mean, it's mind-blowing.
Right.
And I've hardly ever heard him say the same thing twice. There's a lot of stuff that he told me 10 years ago that he still hasn't said, just because you got to ask the right question. And if we were ever going to actually take the time, we literally have 3,000 different samples to talk through, and he has vivid memory of many of them, what they looked like, what their organ systems were like, what made them similar to humans, what made them different from humans. Some of them, a lot of them look a lot like us. A lot of them, really, we wouldn't be too uncomfortable if we met these people. It would be very comfortable. But then there's other ones that look really, really strange. And so I think that what's happening is that there's hundreds and hundreds of Emerys, and they are essentially taking the payment that we're getting, we meaning this secret space program, we're getting these bodies as payment for technology that we're developing on these off-planet bases that we've been back engineering from all this stuff that everybody gives us. oh, I got this really weird machine. It's like a sphere, and it levitates off the ground. And, this was very valuable to the people that we got it from. Will you take this? Yes. So one of the things that Emery said that I didn't even hear until we were literally interviewing for Cosmic Disclosure was that during the time that he was in this, which was in the 1990s, there was so much foreign technology, and that's in quotation marks, there was so much foreign technology coming in that was new, that they were getting something new every day. Every day they have an unfamiliar technological artifact that could potentially change everything about life on Earth. And they're getting them every day. And they've got whole teams of scientists who've never lived on Earth and never will live on Earth, who are working on this stuff and are trying to figure out how it works and tear it apart. And they're building things that are useful. And you got a whole bunch of ETs from all over the galaxy coming here to buy our stuff. Because even though we're very spiritually low on the totem pole, it turns out we're excellent when it comes to building machines. And so a really big part for me of why disclosure is so important is that with disclosure comes the kind of technology that Emery was describing with the cafeteria. The cafeteria story is one of the craziest stories he's got. Because he's there on Kirtland Air Force Base, he goes into this cafeteria, and you, just like what Corey was saying, just like what Henry Deacon told me, just like what Pete Peterson told me, just like what I heard from Colonel Bob Dean or Sergeant Bob Dean, it prints the meal. It prints the meal, and then it flash cooks it for you. It's like the best food you've ever had in your whole life. And then he sits down at the table, and the table is a smart table. It's got graphic displays on it. You can wave your hands over it. There's different gestures for things. If you gesture one way, the mustard and the ketchup and the mayonnaise packets come up, and you can pick one of those, and then you wave your hand, it goes away. You gesture over here, you get your fork and knife. You gesture over here, you get a napkin that just materializes out of the table. Really weird, great stuff. And I thought Emery was a lost cause, and I'm not in any way trying to insult him, and he would back me up on this. I wistfully, there's so many times, I'm thinking now 2011, 2012, where I sat down with him and I just wished that conversation had been recorded because it was so freaking mind-blowing. And then everybody's out there saying, oh, well, not everybody, but a lot of people, oh, David's making all this up. He doesn't have any insiders. This is a joke. He's just trying to sell a story. He's just trying to get clicks on the internet. But wait a minute. Now we got this guy who's come out. He's vouching for me. He's vouching for being my friend. You can prove that he was working with Dr. Greer for over 10 years as the vice president of CSETI. He was on these CE5s, Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind, where they're actually calling in UFOs and having contact with them. And it's because of the background that he had that he was able to be involved in that stuff and that he was good at it. So it's a groundbreaking story. And it got picked up by mainstream media recently. Jordan Sather did a video with Emery, and Daily Star picked it up, and they linked to it, and they're starting to talk about it. So we are winning this war. And full disclosure is a lot bigger than just finding out, oh, well, the Greys are real, and they're from, Zeta Reticuli, right? That was where a lot of the UFO community was maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago.
That's right.
We're talking about thousands of extraterrestrials, dude. We're talking about thousands of cultures in which you could dedicate your whole life to studying the history of one extraterrestrial race, because that history may go on for tens of thousands of years. And the whole of Earth history doesn't really get interesting until about 3000 BC. So we only have maybe 5,000 years tops.
That's it.
And we don't really get good records until the time of Greece and Rome. So holy smokes, if you've got people that have been around for 10,000 years, 100,000 years, and they have a whole history of all the planets that they went to and all the people they met and the musical instruments they played and the songs that were written and their CD collection.
Well, yeah, but David, that has to be the way that it is. We're talking about a trillion stars. And when you once you wrap your head around that number in the Milky Way and how many planets now are associated with those stars, and
NASA saying 40 billion Earth-like planets in our
40
galaxy. 40 billion.
40 billion. So 3,000 tissue samples. Let's say it's 3,000 individual species. Well,
Right.
So what? That's a small number.
It's nothing.
That's nothing. It's nothing. And I've said it. I've said it forever till I'm blue in the face. You need to wrap your mind around that. We are only here right now. This last 2,000 years is thin as a cell of the paint on your wall in the span of time. It's insignificant, and to understand that other species out there, other civilizations, if they are just a fraction younger than us, right, more developed, we're talking about 1,000,000 years. 1,000,000 years of development. Look what we have done in the last 100 years. And you have to look at it in those terms. And there's no other way to look at it. There isn't another way to look at it. These are the facts. So
the old school skeptics would invoke this dreaded Drake equation and say, "Oh, there's 2.15 intelligent civilizations in the galaxy." Well, I'd love to see what a 0.15 looks like, right?
Right.
But that's all been blown out the door. Now we know Mars was once like Earth. That was announced by NASA 2012, that it had 1.5 miles deep ocean across half of its surface. Right?
Right.
You got the face on Mars. You got the pyramids on Mars. There was an ancient civilization there. There's no question.
That's right.
And that's just in our solar system. There's all kinds of weird stuff when you start looking at NASA pictures, the stuff that they didn't edit properly. There's all kinds of weird structures that shouldn't be there that suggest either something ancient or something current. Either way doesn't matter. The fact is we're not alone. And it's a much, much bigger story than Greys from Zeta Reticuli doing abductions and giving you an anal probe. I mean, ufology has totally moved beyond that stuff. It's much, much bigger than that.